What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Josh and Ben with Force Frontier. Today we want to tackle a very controversial topic, that is CQB. Really what we want to accomplish with this first part of this series is to talk about the different types of CQB, because I think that's often overlooked in the industry. We think we put this under an umbrella of everything that is CQB. So when you watch a 10-second IG video, there might be a specific mission that is driving that tactic. So we want to break down the different types of CQB. We want to talk about the different tactics and principles that go into that, and ultimately just our thoughts on the subject as a whole.
Yeah, this is not the end-all be-all. We're not Delta operators, but we do this. We teach this, and if you've never done CQB and you sit on the couch at home behind a keyboard, you can just watch and keep your comments to yourself.
Yep. So with that, let's break down today's video. So what we like to do is, instead of just saying CQB, we want to say there are different types of CQB, meaning if you're in the military and you're raiding a compound, or you're utilizing these tactics overseas in a war setting, that looks very different than if you're a law enforcement professional serving a search warrant, or you're at home defending. So the way I like to look at it is from top to bottom. The raids,
the most aggressive form that you're going to come across would be like you said, your military style CQB. You're going to have, everything's going to be pre-planned, and you're going to try to get that down to the letter. It's going to be mission driven and intelligence driven, and it's going to be a very, very dynamic and aggressive style of CQB. You're going to have all kinds of lethal resources,
but also rules of engagement. What are the laws surrounding that? That's also going to play a factor in our mission and ultimately our tactics on how we serve that. Next down the line, we're talking about hostage rescue. This could be military, this could be law enforcement, but we're talking a much higher likelihood of somebody being injured, including yourself clearing a building. So we're going to take a lot more risks so that we can save another person.
Again, that's going to be mission driven and hopefully intelligence driven.
Yes. And then we get down to something like an active shooter. This is something on the fly, it just pops up, and we got to take on, again, more risk so that we can stop the killing. This is stimulus driven. So it's aggressive. We're running through this building, ultimately listening for gunshot screams, anything that is driving us to a particular area. Then we get into something, more specifically to law enforcement, but that is search warrant.
If you're like a patrolman, you go to an open door at a house, or
alarm
yep, in a building, anything like that. It's going to be much less aggressive, and it's going to be much more slow and methodical in what you're doing. You're not just going to kick a homeowner's door in and shoot the first person you see. That's not legal, and it's not what's going to happen. It's going to be
loud,
slowed down.
We're announcing. Everybody, it's very clear we're there. So it's very different from like a planned op in the middle of the night with our night vision on. Very different. And then the last one is going to be home defense. So I'm just defending my home. So everything else kind of being a little bit more offensive. Now we're going on the defensive. How is that going to change our tactics? Well, we want to talk about all those topics, the resources available, the rules of engagement, and break all that down into today's video. So let's get into it.
We're going to talk about some resources for these different styles of CQB. First thing we had mentioned was a raid, which we said was a highly aggressive, very pre-planned and mission-driven style of CQB. Your example might be there's a high-value target inside a house. You're going to go in there and you're going to snatch that person, or you're going to kill this person. You can call a raid what you want, but in a military sense, this is what a raid is. Obviously, you'd have your small arms that your operators are going to carry. They may be brought in on a helicopter. They may be brought in armored vehicles with heavy weapons, machine guns, grenade launchers. They're going to have a medical team on standby and vehicles for that to extricate someone that may be injured inside the building. So your hostage rescue could again be military, or it could also be law enforcement. You see this does happen in law enforcement. Your resources for this are going to be generally what a SWAT team is going to have. But it could also be what a patrolman carries. You never know when this is going to happen. A hostage rescue could happen at any time, or that you need to act. Your resources there could be anything from patrol rifles that are in a cruiser, your body armor, your handgun that you go to work with every day. If it's a SWAT team, you may have distraction devices, flashbangs. You may have chemical munitions or less lethal options. So, or search warrant or slow methodical style of CQB, where if you're law enforcement, right, maybe you are executing a search warrant, maybe you've come to an open door at a house, you went to an alarm drop at a factory. Again, anyone can do this. If you're law enforcement, you don't have to be SWAT, you don't have to be anything special, you can be a patrolman. And again, your resources are going to be what you basically have in the cruiser for this, unless this is a planned search warrant with SWAT. And again, just like I said, with hostage rescue, all those other resources are going to apply to this. Your chemical munitions, your distractionary devices, your less lethal. Generally, what is going to happen in a home defense situation, or what the safest option would be, is a method called strongholding, right? You get all your family together, you stay in one room, and you defend that one room. And that's going to be because it's always, the defender in a situation is always going to have the advantage. It doesn't matter how good at CQB you are, the best you can hope for are 50-50 odds to win that gunfight if you are the assaulter, because the defender is going to know that you're coming. Your resources there could be the gun you have on your nightstand, a flashlight. If you carry body armor by your bed, I mean, that could be one thing too. But usually you're not going to be as heavily prepared for this. Then we're going to talk about an active shooter. So an active shooter style CQB, again, is something that's going to be unplanned. You could be a civilian doing this. You could be an officer doing this. You do see active shooters that are stopped by civilians with CCWs. So again, your resources for that could be, your AR-15 you have in your cruiser. If you're a civilian, the CCW you're carrying every day, or maybe you carry a long gun in your car, who knows? But that's what you're going to have at the time to act on this. Obviously rules of engagement are going to differ depending on who you are. If this is a military operation, your rules of engagement may be extremely offensive. You may have the area you're raiding or that you're participating in could be considered a free fire zone, where anyone that's in this area is deemed a threat, and you are weapons hot to deal with this person. If you're military as well, it could also be a little more restrictive. It could be you can't take shots at someone unless you've been shot at first and have a positive ID on who actually did it. If you're law enforcement, obviously all of the shootings that you're going to be taking place in are going to be in defense of your own life, somebody else's, or another officer's. So you're going to have to work with those kind of rules of engagement. And then even more restrictive are rules of engagement for civilians. Almost never is it going to be okay, or you're never going to be legally okay to be involved in an offensive shooting, unless of course it was an active shooter. You always have to prove that your life was in danger and that you were acting in defense of your life or someone else's life.
Now that we've covered rules of engagement, different tactics used, different resources, and everything that Ben had explained before, now we're kind of making our way to the doorway. Now, as far as hallways, threshold assessment, any other topic that you guys want on this, we are going to cover that in later videos, so stay tuned for that. But otherwise, let's talk about the main methodologies at the doorway, because that's where people get hung up. That's where we had differences of opinion, guys in one camp versus another. So talking specific to point of domination and deliberate entry, dynamic entry rather, let's talk through that.
One of the types of CQB that is used when you come to the doorway is known as dynamic. And dynamic is a fast-paced, violence of action style of CQB. It still has a place in the world. It's still used. But it's used for specific purposes, right? When you want to have speed and surprise, and you have no other choice but to get inside of a room right now. You could use this for your hostage rescues. You could use this for an active shooter. You have to get into a room to stop someone, and you could use this for your raid style of CQB as well.
And so the point of domination or dynamic approach is going to be less spending time at the doorway and spending more time just getting into the room, dominating the room to ensuring that it's safe. That's kind of the primary purpose behind that. A lot of nuances with that, a lot more detail to go into with that, but let's just show a basic approach to this. With just two men, usually this is more of a four-man scenario for a lot of military groups, but it's going to be dependent on your resources. And in this case, there's two of us here, so we'll show what we got.
So the thought here would be, we both drove our corners, our hard corners, as soon as we came in. Once we got to the wall here and saw there was nothing left, we're going to collapse our sector, both of us, and clear the room. So the thought being, as soon as I drive through the door, I should see someone standing right ahead. And then what's important is I take this corner. Now, when Josh came in and went straight to his corner, I have to be directly behind him as fast as I can to make sure he doesn't get shot in the back by someone that would be in this corner. Once we reach our corners, we collapse our sectors, and we see that there's nobody in the room.
Purpose of that as well is going to be create space for more guys to get in. So if I go straight across, Ben fills in where I'm exposed potentially, and then third and fourth man are going to step in as well and kind of cover more center. Now again, we're not experts on this, but primarily this is what's going to be covered for a point of domination approach. So a couple of the main approaches, button hook or crisscross throughout the door, are going to be your main options. We won't go into detail about that, but button hooking, looping in to the same side that you're already approaching from, crisscrossing coming from opposite sides of the door. This stuff is going to be something we'll cover in a later video in terms of threshold assessment, working with closed doors, open doors. We plan on covering that in a later video, but we want to make that point. The way we entered into the room isn't the only way to go in.
It was kind of a mix of crisscross and button hooking because we were both on the same side of the door.
But the main point being we are
getting to the corners, driving to our corners, and then we're collapsing our sectors of fire.
Yeah, exactly. So good, let's get into the next part, which is going to be more of a threshold assessment. Now talking about a threshold assessment, where a lot of guys would see this as the fatal funnel, there may be a mission set, resources available, or rules of engagement like we covered before that might be a preferred method going forward. So Ben, take it away, man.
I was someone that started with nothing but dynamic entry. That's all we did in the military. There was nothing, we didn't do anything else. It was always fill the room as fast as you can, speed, violence of action, clear your corners. And when we transitioned to this slow methodical search, it was initially hard for me to do that, and I kind of was against it until I started seeing how effective it actually is.
And where is it effective?
It's always effective. If there's somebody in that room, it's more effective than running into the room. Your chances of actually seeing this person are 50-50, that you guys are going to see each other at the same time, versus that guy for sure seeing you run into the room before you're actually going to pick him up with your eyes and process what you're seeing and put rounds on that target.
We're at a disadvantage, like Ben said before, when we're on the offensive primarily, like We're going into a structure a lot of times we don't know. It may be somebody's house, like serving a search warrant. So when they have the advantage tactically from a defensive posture, getting off of this pivot further than we are, let's say a tight hallway and they're deep in the room, basic geometry says that we're going to be at a disadvantage. They're going to see us before we see them. So we need some form of segmented search to assess that from the doorway so we can make a good educated decision utilizing our rules of engagement so that we are not making limiting our bad decisions that we're going to make at that point. So the other purpose too I wanted to talk about was an ambush scenario as well. Can you talk what are some of the circumstances we're going to find ourselves aside from ambush that ambush tactic can kind of cover us? You know what I mean?
The guy inside, if we go running in, can always ambush us no matter what. He's always going to see us coming first. He's going to process what he's seeing and put rounds on you before you process what you're seeing and put rounds on him. The technique we use is called the 45-90-45 technique, and we're referring to degrees: 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 45 degrees. And again, there would be another 90, but we'll show you that here in a second. And the thought process is, when you come up to an open door, you're slicing parts of that room into pieces. So when I approach this door, I stop here, and I have my first 45 degree angle. You can see I can reach out and touch this door. My arm should be 45 degrees into that room. From this position, we're moving slow and methodical. I'm searching the room. I'm looking down low, I'm looking high, I'm trying to see behind things, making sure that this entire portion of the room is clear. There's not anybody in there. I'm not picking up, maybe a small body part that may be sticking out just past 45 degrees that would telegraph someone else's presence, because if I can pick, maybe even a small body part up from this portion, from this first 45 degree angle, now I have the advantage. I know where that person's at. They can't see me yet because they're beyond that 45 degrees. But they've just telegraphed just enough of their body to where I can tell that that's a person. I've now got the advantage here. From your first 45 degree angle, right, you would move into what is now your 90. As I'm going to take my 90 degrees, I'm going to compress my feet, come together, and plant again. I'm now looking 90 degrees straight into the room, right? So I've now picked up another 45 degrees of coverage. If there's somebody in here, they're going to see me at the exact same time that I see them. It's not they're going to see me coming first. I'm going to make this move explosive all at once. I should come into their view as soon as I should come into their view as they're coming into my view. The thought process behind is what I said, 50-50, right? I'm going to be able now, there's a 50% chance that I'm going to be able to put rounds on him first. If I have a higher level of training than this person, then it goes up. My chances of winning go up. From the 90, right, I've now got potentially half of this room cleared. All I can't see is that deep corner, that very, very deep corner. Everything up to this point, I can see half of this room is clear. I'm going to collapse my feet and take the backside 45, another 45 degree section of this room. Okay, so now I see this, there's nothing over here. The only thing I have left to do is to check these hard corners. So it'll be another 90 degree. Before I take those corners, I have the time. Nobody knows I'm here yet. They don't know where I'm at. I'm going to orient my hips in one direction or the other, right? This is shorter. I can see this wall is shorter than that wall. So that tells me since this wall is deeper, there's a higher chance that somebody is probably hiding over here. So I'm going to orient my hips to this direction because I think, taking an educated guess, that this is where someone would be. This is, again, for single man CQB. We're not using 2 people, we're not using 3 people or anything more. This is by yourself. So to take this deep corner, I orient my hips facing that direction already, and I'm going to step into the room. Again, I'm going to collapse my feet together and step into the room all at once. I'm looking in this direction. Half of my body is obscured. If there's someone in that corner, their entire body is obscured. I'm going to appear in their vision at the same time they appear into my vision. Now to think about this back corner here. Again, CQB is dangerous, it's extremely dangerous. No matter what you do, you're not going to be able to do this 100% safe all the time. There's always going to be some risk. You just try to mitigate that risk. Just as if you were to enter a room dynamically and try to cover the whole thing, there's going to be spaces that you're not able to cover right away. This is a scenario like that. When I step into the room, the second I see that there's nobody in front of me, I head check to make sure there's nobody behind me either. Again, it's not perfect, but doing CQB one man is definitely not ideal. Even if you have 3, 4, 5 people, it's still going to be dangerous. So again, you come into the room all at once, nobody there, you head check. If there's somebody here, you would address that target and then you would check.
The other benefit to this is it gives us an out. So I don't need to commit to the room and then be in a gunfight in open space. I can step into the room at any one of these angles, and then if it's, oh crap, this guy's shooting at me and I bail, now I have an out and I don't commit to the room ahead of time, which is going to cause could cause problems. So,
which the bailing is also a very natural reaction. This 45-90-45 concept is what we call behaviorally compliant. It goes along with what your survival instincts are going to do when you're confronted with a threat. If you dynamically enter a room every time, you are committing yourself to that room by rushing into the room. You're moving in with speed and violence of action. Even if there is somebody in this room, let's say with a weapon, and it's already trained on you as you enter that room, you're going to have a very hard time stopping your forward momentum. You've now got yourself into the room. They shoot you, you're down, you're inside of this room with this person before other people are. With this threshold assessment, with this 45-90-45, like Josh said, you're going to have the ability to bail out of a bad situation, right? Let's say I come here, I compress, and I come in, and there is somebody there with a gun. I don't care who you are. You could be a Delta, you could be a SEAL. You're not going to stare down the barrel of a gun that's already pointed at you. You're gonna have the startle flinch reflex. You would come in, you would see it, oh shit, there's somebody with a gun there, and now you can bail out of the room and reassess what you should do now, right? If this is a raid, throw explosives in the room. If this is a SWAT operation, right? We know where this person's at, we now have intel, and now we can start using other techniques to get this person out. You know, your chemical munitions, your distractionary devices, all kinds of things. You have to do CQB in a way that is going to go along with your natural instincts, because you're just not going to stare down the barrel of a threat and flinch. And you want to put yourself in the best scenario to be able to bail out of the room if you have to do so.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of different ways we can tackle this CQB equation, but for like kind of the last main way that people teach and the way this is implemented, whether it's in the industry of law enforcement or military, long axis threshold assessment is kind of going to be our third option and kind of our second option for that threshold assessment technique. So there are two ways we can do this. There's a more of a panning method or a pie method. The pie method is just commonly used that when I'm working off of this threshold, I'm slowly, incrementally taking in information as I move throughout that threshold, moving around whatever pivot point it is. That's what I'm focusing on, just taking little bits of the pie. That's why they call it that. Now, as far as a panning method, this is going to be much more dynamic, and I can still take in the same information, but I'm going to arc around and possibly come to the other side of the door. Now, without getting into too much of the nuances with that, in the problems that could create by splitting the door, we'll tackle that in another video. But as far as panning versus pieing, it's really just doing it at different speeds. Now, as far as what benefits you have from a long axis threshold approach, it's really going to be dependent on if you can get further off this pivot point than your opposing force. So typically, if we think of most households, if you are on the defensive and you're defending your home, being further in the room is going to create a significant advantage to you if somebody is approaching your room from the hallway. If you're trying to secure a hard point and just hold that point and you're not moving through the building, then that is a great opportunity to hide behind the bed, post up, and hold that point. If it's something where you need to push past some of your kids' rooms and you have to get to a staircase or the end of the hall, that's where some of these other principles are going to come into play from a home defense standpoint. Getting back to the long axis threshold assessment, it's imperative that if you are in a hallway, it's important to understand that you're likely not going to be able to get further off that pivot point than somebody in a room. Most modern rooms are 12 feet or so in depth. Those vary, but for the most part, your hallway is not going to be 12 feet deep. So understanding where you are in the structure, understanding are you in a home or are you in a commercial building like we're in right now, that will dictate your tactics. So regardless if it's long axis threshold assessment with the pie and panning techniques, your dynamic entry with the point of domination, or more of a segmented search like we showed before, it's all going to be dependent on the things that we talked about in the beginning of this video. Resources, what is the mission set, and ultimately what are the rules of engagement for you moving through this building. Guys, shout out to Unit Solutions for being a partner with Force Frontier. We have these rifles, really like running them. Allows us to do a lot of really great training. So if you guys are interested in some of that training going forward into 2025, make sure you follow our newsletter, forcefrontier.com, sign up so you can stay in the know. If you guys like the targets that we're using in this video, this is our skill builder target, exclusively available at axletargets.com, AXLE targets.com. You can also find them on our website, forcefrontier.com/challenge, and you can pick yours up today so you can improve on your skills out on the range. Or if you're practicing some tactics, they're good for that as well. All right, guys, we appreciate you watching this long. Ben and I are really just trying to tackle some CQB principles for you to keep in mind, but also going forward, there's a lot more details and nuanced stuff that we want to cover. Weapon manipulation, different tactics that we can cover in much more detail, and endless other stuff. So if you guys are interested in checking some of that content out in the future, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. If we mess something up, hit us up in the comments. We're all ears. We're kind of wrapping through this video, so if you guys have anything that you want to provide insight on, feel free. And then we'll say
I'm keeping this in the outro.
Shout out to Jake, our new camera guy. We're going to be bringing you guys a ton of awesome content, so definitely stay tuned. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for not grabbing my camera.